É agora a vez de ouvirmos a apresentação de José Alarcon, Country Manager Spain and Portugal da Tenable, parceiro RedShift, com o tema Cyber Exposure Management has become paramount in today's converged IT, OT, cloud, identity ecosystems. How does it anticipate attacks and reduce cyber risk?
Good morning. Thanks for our partner RedShift to invite us. A little intro on what Tenable does. I'm going to jump a little bit more into the more practical terms of security management and going from the top into more day-to-day stuff. Tenable is the world leader in terms of exposure management. That is identifying where we have risk. So the main thing when you have to defend against attackers is knowing where you are exposed. So we'll talk a little bit about the attack surface and how we need to evolve this into a full exposure management program in an organization. So any company, any organization has operational risk, financial risk, and cyber risk. Today we're focusing obviously on the cyber risk part of the business, but they're all integrated. Eventually, a cyber risk can put in peril our entire organization. So it will have an operational risk. It can shut down a factory. It can prevent the organization from selling or from attending patients if it's a healthcare organization. Examples like the Red Cross, like Uber in the US, Optus in Australia. I mean, we all have heard about hundreds of these examples. It's not really a matter of you have been breached or not. It's when you will be breached. At some point or another, there will be a breach. The more recent ones, MGM in the US, they acknowledged they're going to lose 100 million. They didn't pay the ransomware. One of their competitors did pay, and their cost is going to be only 15 million. So what do you do? I mean, do you pay or do you just try to recover? There will be some expenses associated. The very last one, I only read about it a few days ago, Clorox in the US. They've already sent out a note to the Securities and Exchange Commission because of a very strong cyber attack. They're going to be losing about close to 25% of their sales in the next couple of quarters until they can recover from their disruption to operations. So why is this happening? Because we've been evolving a lot. Attack surface has been increasing dramatically. We have many more types of devices, many more types of threats. It's a lot easier for attackers to reach us because we have multiple ways of attacking. We have the traditional IT, but we have a lot of cloud. We have OT deployments when we have an industrial deployment. But OT also affects a bank, for example. A bank has substantial IoT and HVAC, heating, ventilation, air control in their data centers. That's part of the OT attack surface. Eventually, any of those waypoints can provide an attack path for an attacker. So when you go down to the real problem, the source of the problem is you can compromise a system by a vulnerability or through a misconfiguration. And if you look at vulnerabilities, and that's what Tenable has been doing for more than 20 years now, is detecting vulnerabilities and recommending ways to fix them. When we look at vulnerabilities in the last few years, only last year there were 25,000 vulnerabilities published during the whole year. If you can see the increment over the past few years, it's really being exponential. It's more and more complex. Any organization that needs to manage potentially 100 new vulnerabilities per working day, it's really impossible. There's no amount of analysts in your teams that can really take care of this. You need more intelligence. You need better use of the technology you have. So just some examples. And the interesting fact is, as a CISO, as in the data that Sophos provided earlier, 27% of CISOs were worried about 0 days. The reality is that's not where the problem is. Many of the deeper threats to our organizations come from long-known vulnerabilities, from years ago even, that simply have not been dealt with correctly. They have not been patched, they have not been fixed. Now, it's important to really know where our problems lie. Here are some examples of this is out of the Tenable report on the most used vulnerabilities over the past year. But again, it's a common theme. Every year we find the same things. Most of the really big threats come from unpatched vulnerabilities. So, and if this is a well-known example, I don't put the name of the end user affected by it, but basically you use an old vulnerability which is exploited. That end system in particular gets a keylogger installed, which eventually allow you to reach the cloud and allows you to reach an unencrypted database with all your customer data. Of course, detonating the GDPR and so on that you need to do once you have an attack. So essentially, you have different ways of coming in, different type of infiltrations. And part of the reason is that a long time ago, we only worried about vulnerabilities in software. But now we have to worry about those same vulnerabilities, which are exploding, as I just mentioned. We have cloud misconfigurations. We have identity misconfigurations. We have what we don't know we have, the unknown assets. Do we know all our exposure to the outside world? This is something that we need to handle. But once you identify all this, you still need to communicate properly. You need to be able to show to your management where the real effect on your business is. The whole visibility, key performance indicators, and so on. And again, we have many tools in place. The average large company will have at least 30, 35, 40 tools in place. When you have a lot of those tools that don't talk to each other, and you need to extract information from them and try to make something out of it, find patterns, it's really difficult. Today, a lot of talk has been devoted to artificial intelligence, trying to make sense out of that. A lot of diverse tools not talking to each other. How can you extract significant, meaningful data from that? That's where you cannot have silos. You need to have integrated communication. Eventually, and this is just one screenshot, but eventually what we want to have is a global exposure score, a global risk measurement that tells me, am I doing well or not globally? This is what your CFO, your CEO will want. But at the same time, that you can drill down, so eventually your analyst can really extract the meaningful information on exactly what the priorities are today. I don't have time to fix everything. So if I only have 5 minutes or 1 hour to fix things, where should I start? This kind of intelligence is already available. Of course, we will enrich it with artificial intelligence, with large language models and so on. But in essence, it amounts to being able to share information between different tools, being able to extract data, and apply learning technologies to try to find patterns in that. So just keep an eye on this. But if you want to get more specific, you also need to learn where you can be attacked. Learn where the attack paths come. Correlate the vulnerabilities from an asset and from an identity. Not all vulnerabilities are critical, but they could be critical if they affect the laptop of your CFO, for example. So you need to really put things in context, see where your attacks can come from. And it's another example where you can actually drill down into real specific data. But overall, when you tell your financial manager, your general manager, where your security posture is, you cannot really get down to such specific levels. You need to be able to provide the bigger overall picture. So just another example, because I don't have much more time, to show that the attacks today are hybrid. And this is also a well-known example where you can have a phishing attack. The first vulnerability is exploited in the first step in the chain. It's an old 2-year-old vulnerability. This has happened this year recently, and when you track it, it's really simple to see where the problem lies. And then it propagates to the Active Directory, present in 98% of the organizations, and not meant as a security tool. It's meant as a user management tool. It has lots of fundamental failings in terms of security. You propagate, you escalate privilege. You start being a part of a group. Eventually, after some time, you can actually control the domain, the Active Directory domain controller. And eventually, that's where we call the crown jewels. Once you get there, and this is typically it's been mentioned before, the 5-day period that attackers will take to propagate and eventually gain control. Once they're here, they control all of your business. And typically, all this propagation has happened without anyone detecting it, because it's been using standard calls into the system. Nobody will realize there's a suspicious pattern, because they've been using normal calls to Active Directory. They've been infiltrating an unpatched vulnerability that has been detected probably a long time ago, but nobody has acted on it. And then what happens is you can have other ways of attacking through multi-factor authentication. And in the end, when you have a complex organization, once you compromise one Active Directory, all those trust relations between the ADs will eventually compromise all of your network, because you will trust whoever is coming from one of those trusted relationships. And eventually, you will compromise a critical infrastructure. This is a real example, company that was actually shut down their factories for quite some time, and they actually shut down everything because they didn't know where the problem was. They had been infiltrated so deeply, they had no way of knowing what was the patient zero, actually. So this can be catastrophic. So it shows a need to have a move to exposure management. And I will be really quick because we're running out of time. But when you go from vulnerability management, and this would be the more traditional parts, vulnerability exposure, web application, and then the new vectors that we have. Attackers can shut down factories now. They attacked our identities, as I mentioned, with the Active Directory. We are also experiencing huge amount of issues when moving to cloud, because it's so dynamic. The traditional tools are not ready to identify a suspicious move in seconds and shutting it down. And then the overall internet exposure, moving to the whole attack surface. And just to close, just to mention it, our approach to this kind of management is to extract data from all those different blocks and really correlating it into a single data lake, where you can extract information using AI and other data science tools we've been using for years to really extract and correlate the risk data. And with that, thank you, and can see you outside.